All right. Welcome everyone to another episode of Pathways to Informatics, where we interview various informatics professionals about the career journeys to give students an idea of all the pathways that are out there. I'm your host, Brian, and today's guest is none other than Mark Siska. Someone that I personally look up to and very excited to have on the show because it's been a while. We've been trying to get Mark on the show for a number of years. But I'm going to turn over to Mark. I'm going to let him do a brief introduction of himself, and then we can jump right into the questions. So, Mark, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. And as much as I shy away from these things, I'm pleased to do this. And I think it's important for future leaders in the informatics field to get a sense of how somebody like myself has progressed over the years. And as Brian mentioned, I'm Mark Siska. I'm the Chief Pharmacy Informatics Officer and been in this field since about 1998. Been in the profession of pharmacy since 1980. So glad to be here, Brian. Thank you.
Now, let's start off with a question, an icebreaker question, because I've known Mark for, I don't know, it's like 7 years now. I know he loves golf, and from his background, I believe that's a golf course. Let's start off with the fun question. Mark, of all the golf courses you've ever played at, which one has been your favorite and why?
Well, I played a lot of golf courses, Brian, and the one that you have in the virtual background was so far to this day is clearly has been my favorite. I don't know if it was the company I was with or who I played with that day, but the course in the background is the river course at Black Wolf Run in Kohler, Wisconsin. And it just offers so much beauty and challenges for those that love the game. I mean, I have other courses that more recently I was able to play out at Bandon Dunes in Oregon, but this one's always my favorite. So appreciate the icebreaker, and actually I can't wait to get there again. So
awesome. Yeah, it looks gorgeous, by the way. Very, very gorgeous. Let's jump into the very first question. I have a list here that I did a bit of research to highlight Mark's history, kind of in a chronological order. So, Mark, one of the first things that caught my eye in your career history is how you went straight into a residency after graduating with your pharmacy degree. And I assume you probably wanted to go into hospital practice, but I also wouldn't have thought that residency was very common at the time. So that was a very interesting choice. Can you tell me about what the environment was like at the time and why you decided to pursue residency training?
Boy, that's a while back, but I think I did an internship as part of my training, and like any College of Pharmacy student, and most of my work was done in the community pharmacy or retail setting, and it was during that time I was actually in the state of Illinois. They were called apprentices, and I did a lot of that work. And again, at a local drugstore in my hometown, and felt. And I was asking one of the pharmacists there in the clinic pharmacy. I said, I'm just really, where else can you go in this profession besides the community practice and in a different drugstore or whatever you want to be. And he mentioned that they have these residency programs, and he mentioned the site that I ended up going to, and really just I didn't really have any aspirations to be a hospital pharmacist by any means. I just wanted a different experience beyond practicing in the community setting and retail setting. So I set my sights on that. I filled out all the applications. What things looked like back then was obviously very little technology back then. Very little technology, and I could remember arriving at my place of employment that I'd been there for now 42 years.
Wow.
I remember arriving there, and like I say, there was very little technology, but yet I needed a challenge, and the opportunity came, before me through the recommendation of some good people and good leaders, and that's where I ended up.
Okay. So it's kind of like a by chance kind of thing. You just wanted something different. One follow-up question on that. Did a match exist back then? Was there any type of residency match?
There was.
Oh,
Yeah, it was a
cool.
residency match. And I happened to get, the other two residents that joined me that year. I mean, they were just great people, and the experiences we had, and back then in 1980, I think most of the experiential work that you did was, working as not that people today don't work, but you did more online work, obviously in a more of a central setting, as most pharmacies are, either on the first floor or the basement, and that's what I did. That's where I started, and had great experience as a general practice residency back then. Really kind of broadened all, gave me just like today, the residency programs provided just a broad swath of knowledge and experience, and that kind of helps create some decisions for you in terms of where you do next. I've always been, and even today, I tell the new residents that, you're always given opportunities come about more often than people think. And the biggest thing is when those opportunities arise, make sure you're ready. Do all you could have done to get ready for that opportunity, and then walk through that door. I mean, sometimes it's scary. I often refer to the movie Monsters, Inc. as, remember, you knocked on those doors and there's a monster on the other side, but typically there's not. Sometimes there is, but typically there's not. And you go through, and oftentimes it's a situation that really works in your best interest, and it keeps you moving forward and challenging you. So I think it's, again, like I say, I think this case is just another one of those things that I saw it as opportunity, and I opened that door and went through it.
And it worked out.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that, Mark. Let's go on to another question. As you know, I'm looking through all the different things that you've done in your career. You have a very long list of accolades in pharmacy informatics, but you also have a long history of pharmacy practice prior to that, specifically prior to taking the Assistant Director of Informatics and Technology role in 2002. So can you tell me more about your reasons why you switched into informatics instead of continuing down the path that you were already on?
Well, it was, again, I get back to, as you move through the different experiences in a hospital practice setting, and again, opportunities arise operationally. Back then, clinical pharmacy was just, I look at, certainly Hilton Head Conference in '85, but clinical pharmacy was clearly just evolving, just as in the early 2000s, pharmacy informatics was evolving, but clinical pharmacy was evolving, and I had aspirations and interest, and a number of challenges existed in that area as well, and I continued to again go through those doors, and found myself as a operational manager. And then one of the things that occurred as part of that journey is that we began doing more automation. So automation was starting to take hold a little bit, but early on, I found opportunities to be involved more clinically, and actually found our way to create more of these decentral models. I think many of us have been through those where pharmacists have worked decentrally, began creating opportunities up on the floors to be more involved as part of the healthcare team and a recognized provider and clinician in that space. So I started applying for different clinical roles and leadership roles in that area, and began deploying more and more decentral types of practices for more clinical pharmacy experience. And as those evolved, not only did I get involved in creating these decentral pharmacies with product and services to kind of justify our existence up on the different units, automation came along, and I always somewhat laughed to myself is that not only was I involved in bringing up these central pharmacies, I was also involved with taking them down, because as automation came, we found a better way to move pharmacists in the decentral settings away from product, because they were still dispensing things out of these floor pharmacies. And that's when automated dispensing cabinets and devices came, and we were able to deploy those. And as more and more technology was kind of evolving, and we were looking at innovation to really make sure that we can have the pharmacist practices at the top of their license, we wanted to automate some of the traditional dispensing roles that they had, and that's what we did. So as I think the real turning point came when, probably in like the late 90s, when health systems began and healthcare organizations began looking at implementing EHRs, and a lot of that came from the two key IOM reports that many were really addressing in terms of how we can effectively deploy different technologies or processes to better manage medicines and create more of a much safer environment, particularly around what I would call the core processes. And as those EHR initiatives started coming forward, they were looking for pharmacists with strong clinical, operational background to be involved. And I got to ask, again, our current director of pharmacy asked myself if I'd be interested. They didn't think it would be much time to be involved in making sure that the pharmacy module or the pharmacy was well cared for along the way. They said, "Oh, it'd take maybe a couple hours a day, or not a day, a couple hours a week or a month, and you'll be in a variety of different meetings and that sort of thing." No way did I ever envision that it would turn in this direction, where it went from 2 hours a month or 2 hours a week to virtually 60 hours a week. And that's kind of what it is now. But that's really how it kind of all took place. Is I think, and I always speak to this. I think our best informaticists are those with a strong background and knowledge of the business of pharmacy, the operations of pharmacy, the safe use of medicines across the continuum of care. And those are typically, you have that experience and you've used it to its fullest. I think you're able to move into an informaticist role a little bit more. Actually, the runway is much less, because you have that strong background. As all of you, many know, that the pharmacy informatics is the intersection between IT and practice and process and policies of a health system and the culture of the health system. That intersection creates a good informaticist.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And very interesting to hear you recap how this started. So it's very similar theme to your residency opportunity there. You just chased into the unknown, but yes, you capitalized on that opportunity.
Yeah, and again, none of it could have been done without, the support of the organization I work for and those around me, and certainly my family and in all those I've worked with, and different physicians and clinical leaders within the department, and all of them really allowed and helped nurture those opportunities in many ways. And like you say, when you go into these and you do it, and the opportunity arises and you do it, you give it your fullest. I mean, you go in and you go, full guns, and you want to do your best, and that's kind of where I went. And then the other thing that came about along with this is, the help of different organizations like ASHP, and back then they had I think it was called CCHIT, and they had, it was a number of different organizations, HIMS another organization, and like I mentioned, ASHP. So they also provided those numerous opportunities along the way.
And I'm sure we're going to get into a couple of them, which is actually a nice segue to the next question that I have here. I'm just going to go out and read this off here. One of the things that, I get a lot of questions from students nowadays that are interested in pharmacy informatics, and when they say, what should I do? I usually tell them to go join ASHP section advisory groups, or the SAGs, for pharmacy information and technology. And one of the things I remember you talking about a number of years ago was that you were one of the founding members of the original group. So it's sometime, I found some documents about in 2006 saying that you were the chair of the SAG. I would love to hear more about how and why that SAG got started and what you had hoped to accomplish in doing that.
Well, that SAG that you mentioned was actually sat under the section of practice managers, I believe. And at that time, and I don't want to mention too many names along the way, but I think in this case, mentioning Toby Clark, I think as one of the key pioneers in this area, I think is certainly noteworthy. And I think he ran this listserv, pharmacy. It wasn't called Pharmacy Informatics listserv. I think it was called just the technology listserv for pharmacy or something. And it was getting hit after hit after hit. And they created a SAG around IT. I don't know if they even called it informatics back then. They may have. And we met and and had all kinds of ideas, like all SAGs do. Most of them bad, but but a lot of ideas and a lot of things that we should and shouldn't do. And one of the things they said is, we should probably, like many SAG, we should create a statement. ASHP was big on creating statements for the role of the pharmacist and whatever, right? The role of pharmacist. You've seen so many of them over the years, and they said, Toby said, and others in that SAGs, a statement on the role of pharmacist in informatics. And it's ironic. It was at that time, as part of the healthcare system that I was in, and the role that I was undertaking is by direction of the current director, of getting involved in a lot of this health information technology. I was in the middle of my MBA class. I realized back then that, I have good, strong background, but, I don't know anything about a computer. I couldn't fix a computer if you asked me. I didn't know where to click. I still don't know where to click. But I thought, and back then they had a number of different classes that you could take and MBAs. And so I took a general MBA, and then they had an MBA, additional MBA where you get technology management training, because I figured I'd be managing a lot of technology. So as part of that course I was writing, it was a lot of it was virtual, and you wrote paper after paper after paper. And so then, as we're going through this, they said, "Oh, we need to write this statement." I said, "Well, my class," and I always said yes to things. This is you got to get that sense, and I still do that. I mean, I said yes to this, and I thought, well,
there you go.
but I said, I'll do it. I'll start it, and I did. So, and actually, that's one of the things I probably and certainly my career, I'm probably most proud of. But again, a lot of help from a lot of people. A lot of people review those documents. But I took the initiative to really kind of create a good start and a lot of good content. And again, it goes through the process of being reviewed by a number of leaders within ASHP, leaders and members along the way, and we had a lot of great members. So that I think that was published the work started probably in 2004. I think it was 2005 it was published, that work. And so getting back to your question is, so then that SAG the next thing that came is kind of a general evolution. Is we went to we really felt the ASHP needed to create a section around this field. It was, the statement kind of mentioned the strengths in why pharmacists play such a key role in informatics. We really felt like the leaders within ASHP should create a section. So we went to the House of Delegates, and they have a process for, again, asking for ideas. And again, most of them probably bad. But this one was good. This one was a good idea, and we really felt strongly about it. And I think that's how it kind of all played out. And the current ASHP leadership felt agreed. That's how the section got formed. So, and then when the section got formed, it was beautiful. I mean, we just at first those years, we're right in the middle of just this huge transformation from paper, typewriters, paper, to electronics. I mean, electronic EHRs, computerized physician order entry, BCMA, kind of the core med use processes, ordering, dispensing, pharmacy systems, administration systems, and clinical monitoring and clinical decision support systems. Those 4 core pieces were, becoming alive. And that transformation was occurring right in the middle of that section, and the section leadership and all those involved in informatics. I always kidded around. I said, everybody at some point in time, when you choose your membership for ASHP and you select a section interest, everybody as a member will select informatics as either their primary or secondary. I said, otherwise we'll never let you use a computer. And so I'm sure they clicked those boxes, but yeah, that's how it kind of evolved. And it was so many opportunities as that transformation was occurring. And we just, like I say, we just dove into every one of them.
It could have been a better time too, because Meaningful Use started in 2009.
Yeah, so. Meaningful Use, e-prescribing, and then ASP, when you're a section chair or a member of the executive committee, the ASHP, make sure that you're involved in some of those key groups or committees that are involved in the evolution of some of these tools. And I remember I was on an NQF committee meeting or committee group that was writing the prescribing standards for Meaningful Use. And
cool. Mhm.
I mean, you're sitting around with, key leaders back then of informatics and some of the legends. And yeah, just really, really great times. And again, so many opportunities. And and again, a lot of the credit goes not only to my organization, the societies that I belong to, and them putting me in those positions. And again, my family. Again, as you know, Brian, I always talk about this. A lot of this work is done when you get home from a
Mhm.
10-hour day and weekends and that sort of thing. So
I was gonna make a comment about that too. I remember working one weekend and Mark came in to write papers.
you know,
And yeah, I always think about that. So a lot of the work that you did is on your off time. So very commendable. I do want to mention, by the way, that this it does come full circle because me doing this right now, which is arguably professional development in pharmacy informatics, started because of my involvement in ASHP SAG.
mhm.
So I probably wouldn't be here if you didn't start that SAG.
Yeah,
But pretty interesting. Comes full
yeah,
circle.
yeah. I
Okay.
might add too, Brian, as I was going through this, I did a lot of work with ASHP and in a lot of the e-prescribing groups, and whether it be NCPDP and others. Um, I maintained my every other weekend role at a retail pharmacy chain
That's
because I wanted to see I wanted to see the evolution of this. I mean, we went
right.
from paper prescriptions and transcribing into a pharmacy system, and to this day, I am finally retired from that 25 years
Oh,
of doing that every other weekend. I could honestly say that we have created almost full interoperation between and exchanging through a number of great standards, and those people are in the trenches writing those standards. Unbelievable work, and I was on some of those work groups, but unbelievable work. And we had pharmacy health and information exchange vendors putting all those pieces in place and having prescriptions go from one computer system to another computer system and completely interoperating those systems, where a technician no longer has to transcribe virtually anything. It's unbelievable to see. But one of the things I always say is we always underestimate the impact of technology, but we overestimate the time to adoption. And I never really thought it would take so long to do so many things, but I mean, I think it was Bill Gates that said that we underestimate the impact of technology, but we overestimate the time to adoption, and it is slow, and you have to have patience. So I guess I've had patience.
So I never knew that's why you worked at a retail store. That's very interesting to know. I was always wondering, why do you spend every other weekend doing that? But that's awesome that you were trying to see the evolution of the work, and I'm sure you made a huge impact being on the front lines to provide some of that feedback back to those work groups too.
Yeah, yeah, you just could see it unfold right in front of you. And then they had the real-time prescription claims and that sort of stuff. But yeah, just fascinating to watch it all come to life. I would have liked it
Progressed.
would have been great if it was adopted sooner. I could have retired from that work sooner, but it was 25 years. So,
It's okay. Yeah, like you said, it takes time. It takes time.
mm,
Okay, well, let's move on to another question here. Moving on along from 2007 and onwards, you have probably more contributions than I can count. I was just going through the list, and I'm just like, dude, this man does a lot, especially like back to back. So whether it was publishing what future organizational structures of pharmacy should look like in 2008 with Gerald Meyer, to co-authoring the technology briefing paper for the Pharmacy Practice Model Initiative with Dennis Tribble in 2009, it seemed as though you were already blazing a trail and influencing the practice already. So what really stood out to me is, you're doing a lot. Why did you pursue a MBA on top of that. Can you tell me more about your rationale and why you decided to go pursue an MBA despite a long list of accomplishments?
Well, I briefly mentioned that before, is that I felt somewhat at a loss when talking to people that were developing the technologies, right? I didn't understand what they were talking about. I mean, I could certainly speak to practice and the business of pharmacy and the clinical aspect of it and the operational pieces. And certainly within my organization, I understood process and the culture of our organization and that sort of thing. So I was able to navigate those pieces, but I couldn't tell you about an SQL or the acronyms that they were using. And I felt like they had somewhat of unfair advantage over me, and I wanted to level that playing field. And so I thought the business side was important to know how to manage projects, which an MBA does a nice job in giving you that needed infrastructure to know how to manage projects and how they work and how they have a beginning and an end. And so I felt, I really needed to close that gap. It was very important to do that. And I think today, the more the advanced training around informatics, I think is a blessing. We didn't have as much of that, when back in the early years, but I think more advanced training around, concepts around clinical informatics or just informatics, because I'm not formally informatics trained. And I think moving into that direction, I think is critical. And my advice to others would be probably to not only have a good, strong clinical and operational background in pharmacy, but also having an MBA in advanced training in clinical informatics is critical, especially today. It is so much about data and we're into the analytics realm. It just gets that education and knowledge and training, and then obviously we have informatics residencies today, and those I think are again another blessing, and we have great leaders that help put those on the map. We were early on in getting those started, and I'm happy to see those are continuing to grow.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that story about pursuing a master's. Certainly agree it's important, especially all the different projects that we manage. I'm sure there's a lot of great skill sets that can be obtained from that.
Yeah, and in pharmacy, traditionally, they it's real hard for them to work within a structure of a project, and it's always challenging. They like to rapid prototype everything, and I don't I don't fault them for that. Because the information and data and knowledge around pharmacy is changing every day, very data rich, right? Information changes frequently, so we need to be agile. But I think having that knowledge really kind of helps overall.
I'm sure it led to a lot of the successes that we've seen over the years because you got that MBA too to help guide all the projects along. This next question I have is a bit open-ended. I'm kind of curious how you're going to answer it. This is near and dear to me. So in 2011, you wrote an article about the workforce challenges being one of the barriers in adopting HIT, or health information technology. And you specifically noted that there is an insufficient supply of individuals who are trained with the education and that intersects healthcare, computer science, and informatics. That has created a huge challenge. How do you feel about that right now, like our current state?
Well, Brian, this is one of the areas where I when you look at it, when you look at that intersection in the skill set in that an individual has to have in order to be a successful informaticist. I think it's often hard to put all those pieces together, right? They may have one, and they may have strengths in some areas, and in some, so not as much. But you really have to have a lot of exploratory analysis type of skills, a real deep knowledge of clinical process and outcomes data, analytic skills, knowledge management, process redesign skills, automation beyond dispensing cabinets, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just hard to find somebody that meets all those, brings, expertise in all those pieces and parts. But that's why I think we have a team with a broad sense of skills and skill sets, and we bring those together, and we complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of that work where we might have some skills that are not as robust as others. We develop those over time. But to answer your question, I still think we have work in that area. I know we're making some progress, but colleagues like mine that served with me on some of the early section, the SOPITs, like Brent Fox, for instance, is trying to evolve informatics coursework in colleges of pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to penetrate that curriculum is difficult at best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can do that more broadly, I think we could really move, and then again offering, like clinical residencies in informatics, and then more formalized training in informatics with advanced degrees, etc. I think we could start making more of an impact there, Brian. I think I don't know where perhaps you went to school, but coursework, I think, in the informatics realm is still somewhat
Huge.
lacking. Although
Mm-hmm.
I would say that folks like Brent Fox and others, I know that others have worked in this area. They're really they continue to work with the pharmacy educators to make this either a required coursework or at least strong elective selections within the process.
Yeah, this is very near and dear to me, and definitely follow a lot of Brent Fox's work. He's done amazing work, all tons of publications on this. This is near and dear to me because I try to do this on social media to scale some of the content. But okay, let's move on to another question here. As our nation went through, what I like to call the meaningful use or high tech era, right after 2009, lots of EHRs being adopted around the nation. My assumption would have been at that time, everyone has an EHR or adopting one. There probably would have been some amount of guidance about the pharmacist role in clinical informatics. However, you drafted the ASHP statement about that exact topic in 2015, so a couple of years after 2009. Can you tell me more about what the landscape was like at the time, and why did you feel that was needed?
The initial role of the pharmacist in informatics was done in 2005. The 2000, what did you say, 15?
2015.
Was a refresh that I wrote along with, I never do anything alone, a great number of people who help review and provide feedback. And again, grateful for all of those that helped. How I saw things back then, and where I made some changes, Brian, from the initial document, were in two places. Really, the evolution of data information and knowledge management, right? And then treating the data coming out of these EHRs as an asset to your organization. and the importance for an informaticist to have a background and knowledge of how to leverage all the data, information, and knowledge effectively, and to consume it, and then to offer it up to our providers, clinicians, in a meaningful way, in real time, with making sure that everything we offered them was actionable. As we knew, providers, they don't mind going forward, clicking more buttons to get the good answer. They don't like going back. Mm-hmm. And so make all that information and provide it real time in the context of that patient. So what I really focused on in the kind of the refresh was data, information, and knowledge management and analytics, because I really felt like we're in another, we're transforming to this. Okay, we have EHRs, we have core systems in place. We're bolting on supporting systems to the EHR, either through integration or interfaces. And there's many systems we do to that enhance the overall experience from a med management perspective. But what we haven't been doing is, well, how we, all the data coming out of there, how are we best utilizing it? Are we using it, to transform the practice? Are we using it for analytics? Are we using it to grow the practice, to improve the practice? All those things, I think, is what I wanted to make sure that I addressed in the refresh. And I don't know if I did or not in this particular publication, or if it was in a future publication where I talked more about the how departments of pharmacy need to grow their informatics practice. And what I mean by that is, I really felt that pharmacy departments had strong operational teams and clinical teams, but they haven't necessarily really embraced the concept of creating what I would call, and others would call, a third pillar. And the third pillar of pharmacy practice should be informatics. And so I really haven't seen the uptake in that to the same degree, just as we mentioned before, Brian, about the curriculum and the education in colleges of pharmacy. We're making progress, but also would like to see departments of pharmacy to develop their, for lack of a better word, a third pillar around clinical pharmacy informatics.
Yeah, there's probably a lot more opportunity for growth in that area. I think it was you wrote quite a few articles that talked about that too. I can't keep track of articles, but it's great. I mean, that's the stuff that they're reading. In fact, this statement that you wrote was I probably read it 5, 6, 7 times because that was when I was graduating and trying to figure out what is the role that I should be playing in informatics. So these papers that you're writing is certainly guiding the growth of where our careers or profession is going. Okay, so now we're going to begin to wrap up this interview. I have some overarching questions about your career as a whole. 3 questions in particular. So let's start with the first one. Tell me about the most challenging time that you've had in your career and what that experience was like.
Most challenging time, you have so many. I think overall, the most challenging times are what I would call, reflect back on is, probably the first and foremost is, and we talked about this earlier, is having that gap in just knowledge as I was, as I walked through the door and said, yes, I will do this type of work, but had no understanding of technology and its use, and really feeling like I was really behind the 8 ball and trying to advance my skills to get to a point where I could at least speak the language. And so that was probably the first. But again, I had great people around me and a supporting family and that sort of thing, so I can go back to school and learn more. I think probably the second, and there's probably three that I could think of, is just the some of the larger implementations, where you putting in a new EHR, you're going from paper to an EHR, and some of those moments and days.
Yes.
And I think everybody could relate to those. I mean, those are not unique to me, but again, you do those with humility, and you do those with grace, and you do those with gratitude and love for your coworkers, and then lastly, I think the challenge continues, I think, in many respects, is we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that, continuing to work with the practice to embrace the field of informatics, where it's we are looked at as and I'm this is it's just in my a sense that, I hear this from a number of folks in the field that, many still look at us as pharmacy IT, and they don't necessarily utilize the word informatics, and sometimes not necessarily embraced as a colleague. But we made some great headway there, and I'm certainly not speaking about our own organization, but again, in general, I think that I think we still have some work to do there. And I'm not so sure why it is, but I think some of it, I think, is just the reluctance to maybe to give up some of that that simply oftentimes sat within either the CPO or the director of pharmacy, and that was really their interest in their role. But it's really kind of feeling confident enough that you have an informatics team that could really hear your problems and solve them, because they don't necessarily need to not only recognize the problems, they don't necessarily need to solve them if they have a team of informaticists that can really find good solutions to grow the practice. So,
Okay, plenty of challenges to go around.
yeah.
All right. Second question, overarching question here. What do you think has been the one or two things that have made you successful in your career?
Well, that's pretty simple, Brian. I mean, I think, certainly the good Lord and my faith, my family, the organization that I work for, the different societies that that took me under their wing and trusted me, so, and again, and then lastly, just having my coworkers, the people that I've worked with over the years, and even currently the team I have, I always you've heard me say this, I love my coworkers and I like my practice, and I think that's that's really that's what made me successful, and then just having those opportunities that not only my department has given me, my organization has given me, my family has given me, all those sorts of things, all those doors and opportunities you walk through. It takes time and energy, and so yeah, that's what I would say.
Support definitely goes a long way.
Yes.
So definitely feel the exact same sentiments as you there, Mark. Okay. This is always a very interesting question here. Last part is, if you were to go back in time what would you have wished you had known when starting off in your career? You can pick any time in your career at all, but is there any particular time you wish you could go back and tell yourself something?
That's pretty simple too. I mean, I think if I go back in time, if I knew it was going to take this long to do it, not the interview, Brian, it's a beautiful interview,
Okay.
but if I knew it was going to take so long to make, to take steps that we've had, I think I don't know if I don't know if I knowing that if I would have maybe said, I need more instant gratification, in terms of a profession and because this is it takes time and many iterations, many, how many times can you go through a project and have a lessons learned slide? I'd love to have my last presentation of some sort of project where I absolutely have no lessons learned. You know what? I don't think that can happen. The only way that could happen is when the lessons learned side is my last presentation, and the next time I will be sitting on a beach in Florida or something like that. So
now, if you think about that though, imagine if, because imagine if you weren't in these positions. Let's say you didn't get into informatics. How much longer would it have taken for us to get to where we are now? Right. So it's a good thing that we had you in these roles, writing these statements, guiding where the direction of pharmacy informatics would go. Otherwise, it probably would have taken a lot longer. So we're glad that you picked this path.
I was one of many, Brian, as you know. I'm humbled by the people I've worked with, and I would love to go through all the names of all the people that I've had in contact over the years. But anybody that knows me, that has worked with me, they know I'm talking about them, because that's what's really made the difference. And all I really did is either put a pen to a piece of paper and start writing. And that's one of the things I think I can do. And then just doing my best to make sure that the practices has the tools to not only help fulfill their vision and their roles, grow them as to the point where they feel like they're working at the top of their license at every turn. Then I know I'm doing a good job. But again, a lot of the work is done by a lot of great people. And that's the one inspiring thing for me as I kind of head towards the end of my career. We have great leaders and in pharmacy and pharmacy informatics in general as well. So I'm confident things will continue to go in the right direction.
Very modest guy, Mark. You made a lot of contributions, so I think we all can appreciate you for that. I have two final questions for you. One's not really a question, but I like to ask everyone in the pharmacy informatics world what their advice would be if they were to talk to someone who has an interest in informatics. Someone just in pharmacy school, perhaps just graduated and they're interested. Is there any, words of wisdom that you would share with someone like that, which they would be watching?
Words of wisdom. I get back to what I talked about before is always, if there's a direction that you're looking at going to, like, so for instance, if you have interest in informatics, right? So what have you done to prepare yourself for that? Because I remember we hired a bunch of informaticists, but I think for one of the larger projects we did within the organization, as part of that, we really looked for pharmacy trained residents in informatics, simply because, again, they took the time and they did the work to better prepare themselves for that environment, right? So that's a word of wisdom is preparation. Again, I forget the quote about luck, but luck is really overcome by a lot of preparedness, right? And then the other thing is, don't get discouraged by lack of opportunities, because they will come, and when they come, and if they come, be prepared. So if you want to be prepared and be ready, and operational experience will never hurt you. Do not undervalue what you learn in the business of pharmacy, whether it be in community or ambulatory care, inpatient, critical care, acute care, whatever you want to do. Learn the business, learn the practice, all, take all those opportunities to do that work.
Okay, very nice words of wisdoms there. I always encourage students to do the exact same thing with the practice. Definitely get some practice experience, and preparation is 100% critical in achieving those goals. I'm going to end with one last question here, Mark, and it's primarily any specific shout outs that you have, plugs, anyone you would like to mention before we end this video?
No specifics. Again, just very grateful, certainly, for my family and all those that supported me, and our organization that I work for, the department that I work for, the leaders who allowed me to be involved in this work, the different societies, from HIMSS to ASHP to NCP. It just goes on and on. Many of them, again, made a significant impact, and those certainly those I've worked with and for, and certainly on the section. And I just that's one of the things I look back on in those first 2 or 3 sections that it was probably, and I know that if they're watching or they end up watching, they'll know who they are. But those were some of the greatest times. I will mention, we talked about Brent Fox, but there's a lot, but I know one of the informaticists that has done so much work, so brilliant and innovative, is Alan Flynn. I don't know if you read any of his work, but
yeah, of course.
I just love that guy, and just his ideas and his thoughts, and I think he's still active, and I just encourage him to keep going, just like many others. I don't want to single him out, but I do recall him and being involved in the early sections, and there's many others. So that's all I really have in terms of shout outs. There's a lot of people to shout out, let me tell you.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it's fascinating to hear some of these stories, because these are all individuals that and I'm sure I know many of the people that you're talking about, because I read all their books, I read their articles, I've seen them all over. So it's fantastic what you guys have done. So
we wrote a number of books. We wrote a number of books and chapters, and together, I mean, we just hammered these things out, just boom, 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 just kept going. So, but it was fun.
Well, Mark, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing all these stories with us. I'm sure it's going to be very beneficial to many folks out there. Want to thank the audience that's tuning in, watching this on LinkedIn. And I think that's it. That's a wrap on the interview. Thanks again, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see everyone on the next episode.